This is episode 2 of the How to Fix Offseason Guide thing I'm doing. So, starting with the Golden State Warriors, this is a team, they've missed the playoffs for 2 straight seasons after essentially dominating the NBA for the past half decade. They won 3 championships, made 5 straight finals, made the playoffs, I believe, 2 years before that. And now they're at a very interesting road point. So they went 39-33, lost. They were in the playing game, lost the first one to the Lakers and La Three Rims. And then they lost another close game to the Memphis Grizzlies. So they did get the 8 seed, but they lost both their playing games. And they currently have a $168 million payroll, which is both over the salary cap and over the expected luxury tax of about $136 million. So they have a lot of money to pay. And according to ESPN's Bobby Marks, the Warriors' luxury tax situation is considered, quote, dire, and they could be paying up to $120 million extra in 2021 and 2022. But there is some hope, obviously, on this team. Klay Thompson should be coming back after a 2-year absence. Steph Curry placed 3rd in the MVP voting just last year, and maybe had arguably his greatest season of all time, which is saying a lot. And Draymond Green had a bounce-back year, 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting as well. And they have some interesting assets going into the 2021 free agency. Just looking at their key free agents before we dive into it, Kelly Oubre is a free agent, Kent Bazemore, Jordan Bell, and Nico Manion. So they only have four free agents. 1 was a starter, and 2 are like bench players, and then Jordan Bell didn't really play much. So, they have some free agents, but a lot of their team is kind of stuck together. So the thing that makes the Warriors interesting compared to the other teams that I'm going to be doing and the other teams who are on the fringe contention level, they have 2 lottery picks. They have the 7th overall pick, which they got in the D'Angelo Russell trade, and they have the 14th overall pick, which is their own. So, they can pair those 2 picks and Wiseman or Wiggins to get a player, but I'll talk about trades in just a bit. We want to start with the draft. So, starting with their 7th overall pick, I'll start with this. Based on the reports I've seen, James Bouknight is probably going to the Thunder at 6, but by the off chance he does slip, he'll be the best option available in my opinion, and can serve as a secondary shot creator and playmaker next to Steph. But in my opinion, and based on what I've been seeing through mock drafts and seeing on Twitter, he's going to be on Oklahoma City, so I don't think he'll be available, but just wanted to throw that out there in my humble opinion. So there's 4 prospects I could see the Warriors going after with the 7th overall pick. So we'll start with Jonathan Kuminga, who is the most interesting prospect, one of the most interesting prospects in this process. Guy's a very high potential, but he's raw right now. He's the best athlete probably in the draft. Excellent leaper, standing at 6'6", 210 with a 7-foot wingspan. Excellent finisher, can finish through contact. He can put the ball on the floor. He can attack the cup. But I don't think the Warriors will go after him because I just think he's too much of a project for the Warriors to take on him. Now, I will say this. If the Warriors are trying to use this pick as trade bait, Kuminga probably has the most value because of just his sky-high potential, his raw athleticism. If you can develop him properly, he's going to be a great two-way player. He has the physical traits. He's obviously already great at finishing at the rim. He has the tools to be a great defender. He has good size and can probably guard 2-4, 1-4 easily. But he lacks the awareness on the defensive side of the ball, and his jump shot isn't where the Warriors want him to be. And especially with this pick, the Warriors probably want to get someone who can contribute right away because they need a bit of talent, especially if they do make a trade and unload some pieces. But I think he has some great potential all around. I just think he's too much of a project for the Warriors to take him on. They need someone who can help out right away. So now there's Moses Moody out of Arkansas. Now, if there's a guy who can make an impact on day one, is Moses Moody. He is a 3-and-D guy, probably the best 3-and-D prospect throughout the entire process. I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, he has a high motor. He's a hustle guy. He stands at 6'6", 205 pounds with a 7'1" wingspan. He has great instincts off the ball. And then in terms of his offensive ability, while he isn't a great shot creator, he shot 36% from behind the arc and 81% from the line. So he's going to contribute day one as a guy who can complement Steph Curry, Draymond, Klay Thompson, and who knows, if this pick works out for them, he can maybe become the next Klay Thompson for this team. Obviously, that's a bit of a stretch to say, but he looks to be making an impact right out the gate. Now there's Franz Wagner, brother of Orlando Magic center Maurice Wagner. Franz Wagner is a bit shorter. He's a small forward. He's the same archetype as Moses Moody, but he isn't as refined as a prospect, in my opinion. He does bring versatility on the defensive end of the side. He can guard 2 to 4. He has length, mobility. He's a high IQ player who knows when to help off and is great in help defense. He can also be a secondary playmaker alongside Curry and Draymond, which kind of separates himself from Moody, but he really needs to fix his jump shot. He has a slow release that can be blocked easy. He can't create his own shot because he doesn't have that quick first step plus the slow jumper. A comparison I saw that kind of really is really good is like a not as big Thaddeus Young. So like a guy who can do everything at a solid enough level, which if you want to go that route, I think that could work for the Warriors. Like I said, he's still a bit away from his three-point shot, but he did improve from his freshman to sophomore season, going from 31 to 34%, but it's still not where you want to be, and despite his height, I think he stands at 6'9", he's only 220 pounds. He's not big enough to play at least the 5 at the NBA level. And finally, there's Corey Kissbert. He is the best sharpshooter in the draft, but I just don't see with that the 7th overall pick the Warriors should take him. He's not a great athlete. He doesn't have good athleticism or lateral quickness. He can't really handle the ball that well. He's not a great passer. He's a sharpshooter with other skills, but he's not going to wow you in any other aspect. He's probably going to have to be hidden on defense at the next level. He will come in day one and become a sharpshooter. So if the Warriors think like, hey, we can make up for the defensive lapses with Draymond, Klay Thompson if he comes back, Toscano Anderson, Andrew Wiggins took a step up defensively, but I just think you can get still solid 3-point production from a guy like Moses Moody while also having elite defense. So obviously, if you couldn't tell by my analysis, I think the Warriors should go after Moses Moody. He is someone who is a plug-and-play option, and if Kelly Oubre doesn't re-sign, which, spoiler for later in the video, I don't think he will, he's a guy who can come off. He's a guy who can come off the bench and still provide a good role in the similar vein to Kelly Oubre, maybe not as much of shot creation. The 14th pick is where things get very interesting because there's a lot of players I've been seeing hovering around this range. I've even seen Franz Wagner and Corey Kissbert, who I had them taking at 7. I've seen them drop all the way down to this spot. So it's very interesting to see who's available, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of guys who I think the Warriors could benefit from. I'll start this off by saying prospects who I've seen around this range who I just don't think the Warriors will take. Kai Jones, he just needs way too much time to develop. Plus, they already have James Wiseman and Marquise Chris on the roster, so I don't think they need the big man. Keon Johnson, he's another guy I think who needs to develop. Same with Zaire Williams of Stanford. Trey Murphy, he's a great 3-and-D guy, but I feel like if you already took Moses Moody or Franz Wagner, I feel like that's kind of like a bit excess. Also the same with Chris Duarte, and then Usman Garuba, I think needs time to develop. So I feel like those are a couple of guys who I think are going to be available, but for more fit and like timeline reasons, I don't think they necessarily need them. There's a lot of options that they can go here. I'll start with Josh Giddy, who is a 6'8" point guard floor general. He's an exceptional passer and has great core vision. He led the NBL, which is the National Basketball League in Australia. He led them in assists per game at 6.7. He did average 3 turnovers a game, which isn't great, but that 7.6 benchmark is amazing. He's going to enter the NBA as one of the top passers, and especially when you have Steph Curry on your team, you can have him play a bit more off ball if you have a guy like Josh Giddy, so, it makes the defense gravitate towards someone else. He has an inconsistent jump shot. He shot 29% from behind the arc and 69% from the line, which isn't great, but like I said, he can operate in the pick and roll, which, for God's sake, the Warriors basically, brought it to the forefront. So, he has great handles. He can run the pick and roll. Excellent playmaker. He can finish at the rim when he does take it. He controls the pace of the game. He's someone who can, for those, let's say, minutes that Steph Curry's out or he's taking a rest, he's someone who can operate the offense, which, if you watched the Warriors last year, that was a real struggle because once outside of Steph Curry, they really didn't have a consistent playmaker or offensive facilitator. I think Josh Giddy serves that role well. Now, defensively, he too lacks the lateral quickness on the defensive side of the ball, but at his size, at least his length, he might be able to make up for the fact. I did also, in his combine measurements, he does have a shorter wingspan than his height, which is a bit of alarm, but I'm not too worried. I think if you can get a guy like that who's an instant playmaker, who can run the offense when Steph Curry isn't on the court, or he can allow Steph Curry to run a bit more off ball, I think they'll be fine with that selection. Another selection I love at this spot is Davion Mitchell. This guy is the perfect package. In my opinion, if he was 6'5", he would go probably top. He would go at probably top 7, top 10. He is just that good. He won the NCAA Defensive Player of the Year, averaging 2 steals a game. He always guards the best player. He brings maximum effort offensively. He's a great finisher at the rim. He can create off the bounce. He shot almost 45% from behind the arc on over 4.5 attempts per game, and he's improved as a shooter progressively over his past 3 years. He's a good enough ball handler who can run the ISO. The only offensive limitation, or one of the only offensive limitations he has, is he really can't run the pick and roll that well, but he's a great shot creator. He can shoot from behind the arc. He's a great defensive player who can give you maximum effort. And if you combine him with Moody, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, that's gonna scream. That's probably a top 5 defense in my opinion. Now, obviously the big concern is his size. He's 6'1" with a 6'4" wingspan, so he is limited on who he can guard. And obviously, there's always the question of, how small guards can dominate, but we've seen guys who are on the smaller side who can dominate offensively. Obviously, Trae Young's a good example, and then Donovan Mitchell, I think, only stands 6'3". So, he has all the skill sets to be a great player. He has to improve on his free throw. He has to improve on his foul shots and getting to the line itself because he only shot 64% on 2 attempts. But he brings a championship pedigree. He hustles. He's a great shot creator. He does essentially everything. And he's someone who can come in for the Warriors and make an instant impact. And I think that's what the Warriors would want with this selection. If the Warriors want to take a risk on a prospect, like with this 14th pick, and I think Josh Giddy also kind of falls in this category. I probably should have done Davion Mitchell first, but whatever. Alperen Sengun, I think that's how you pronounce his name, from Turkey. He's getting Nikola Jokic-esque comparisons for a reason. He's an amazing post scorer who has an array of moves. He can do spins, fadeaways, hook shots, off shoulder, back shoulder. He's an elite rebounder, especially on the offensive end, averaging almost 4 rebounds a game, which led all of the Turkish Super League at 18. He can run the pick and roll and pick and pop, which, come on, imagine a Steph Curry Sengun pick and roll or a Draymond Green and Sengun pick and roll. That's going to be interesting to watch. Now, The knock on him is, one of the knocks on him, obviously he's not that athletic, and as a result, it makes him a below average defender. Also, he gambles a lot on steals and blocks, which causes him to be out of position, and maybe being around a guy like Draymond Green can help him at least in that aspect be better. So like you're not gambling too much, and obviously learning under a guy like Draymond's going to help you out tremendously for defense. Also, he didn't shoot well from behind the arc. I think he shot sub 20%, but he did shoot 81% from the foul line. And the way I look at it, if you're not a good 3-point shooter, but you're shooting like above average from the foul line, I think that's something positive to look at and saying, you know what, if you give this guy like a couple of years, he can probably develop into at least an average 3-point shooter, and that looks to be the case. And so if you have a guy who can run the pick and pop, pick and roll, score inside, shoot, handle the ball a bit, offensively, that's amazing. But his athleticism is a cause for concern. Also, he can get bullied by bigger players, and especially with the Warriors who don't have a lot of big men, Sengun's probably going to have to play the 5, so that will be interesting. But he did average 19 points a game on almost 65% shooting against grown men, so I think this would be a very fascinating selection for the Warriors. So next is Sharif Cooper out of Auburn. I think he's another guy you can make a case for being the best playmaker in this draft class. Dude has amazing pass vision. He can make passes into tight windows. He excels with the ball in his hands. He could run the transition. He had 8 assists per game for Auburn last year and was responsible for 50% of Auburn's points when he played, which is ridiculous. He joined Trae Young as the only freshman in the past 30 years to average 20 and 8, which that's some pretty good company to be in, if you ask me. He has a quick burst of speed. He can really see the play before it develops. He is a great scorer despite a shooting limitation, which I'll talk about in just a second. He's craftiness and scoring the paint. He gets at the free throw line at a ridiculous rate. He averaged over 8.5 free throws per game last year and shot 82% from the line. Now, obviously, some of the draws from his game. He, too, is a smaller guard. He's standing at 6'1", 180. Now, I will note, at the Combine, he was listed at 6'3". People say that's a typo, but I will throw that out there. And so, it will limit him offensively, and, maybe if, some of the bigger NBA defenders, he might have a bit of a harder time struggling to score against. Also, he has a high turnover rate, which he averaged over 4 a game now. In my opinion, if your assist-to-turnover ratio is about 2, and based on how high of a usage he had at Auburn, I would assume that would probably come down a bit once he gets to the pros and, he's not literally the main focal point of an offense. That's just my opinion. Like I said, he has to work on his jump shot. It's weird. He has a bunch of weird mechanics. There's like a hitch, a lean back, and like he doesn't put a lot of jump in his jump shot from what I've seen and what people said. They say it's like taking like a longer free throw. Like that's how it appears it looks. So he'll obviously need to work on that. He shot 23%, but he took 5 attempts per game, which you could say, hey, he shouldn't be taking that shot, which is like an IQ. It's like, he should only be taking the shots he should really be taking, or it's saying, hey, this guy has confidence and he isn't scared of any shot, which that's how I more like to view the game. So I think this is a very intriguing prospect. Sharif Cooper kind of reminds me of what Cam Payne did for the Suns this year, where he can just ramp up the offense. And I think, for a team that needs another bench or needs a bench point guard, bench playmaker, when Steph Curry is on the bench, Sharif Cooper can be a great guy. Now, obviously, he has his flaws to work on, but if he can fix that jump shot, maybe lower the turnovers, I think he'd be a great offensive player. So the last prospect I'll go in depth about is Jalen Johnson, who is very different from a lot of these other players. He's a two-way slashing forward. He was the guy from Duke who opted out before the tournament or before the season ended to focus on the draft. He obviously has an amazing finishing ability. He can either finish through contact or avoid the contact. He did shoot 44% from behind the arc, but that is a bit deceptive because he only took 18 threes and he shot 63% at the line. And like I was talking about for guys like Sengun and Cooper, who have high free throw percentages but low 3-point percentages, it's the inverse. That if you're shooting a high percentage from behind the arc, but a low percentage from the line, you're probably going to be a below average shooter. And also, he isn't great in the catch and shoot, but he does a lot of other things well. Like I said, he's a great athlete and he has good size, which will already make him like a serviceable defender on the defensive end. And obviously, if you get a guy like Draymond Green who can help teach him like defense and like get his IQ up, he'll be solid. He's a solid enough playmaker, and also he's a great rebounder. Average 6 rebounds a game at Duke. So if I were the Warriors and in this hypothetical scenario and everyone was available, who would I take? I truly I'm just thinking I think all these guys are good selections. I think I'm gonna go with Davion Mitchell, but the difference isn't that high. You can make an argument for maybe exclude Jalen Johnson, who I think is kind of below them, but if you want to say Sengun, Giddy, Mitchell, Sharif Cooper, if you say, hey, I think this is why they fit, because they all serve their different roles in what the Warriors need to have fixed. I think Giddy serves as like the playmaker. Sharif Cooper has more of that bounce to it. Like Giddy's just more of the big playmaker guy. Cooper is more of that acceleration, that quick bursts that can change the pace up. Davion Mitchell's the all-around great prospect who maybe doesn't have the ceiling as high as some of the other players because maybe of his size. And then Sengun is just if he gets everything together, that's going to be an elite player. So I think I'm going to go Davion Mitchell. Maybe I'm a bit higher on him than other people are, but I feel like for what the Warriors need, a guy who can just do everything to start off. So now we're going to go into everyone's favorite part, trades. Excuse me if I butcher this name, but per Connor Letourneau, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I could be butchering it, excuse me, of the San Francisco Chronicle. The Warriors' current roster construction and financial constraints make packaging the 7th and 14th pick together for a starting caliber player in his prime, quote, their plan A. And John Hollinger of The Athletic kind of just shared the same sentiment, saying that there's a widespread expectation that the Warriors will use the 7th pick and James Wiseman to push for an immediate roster upgrade. Like I did for the Sixers, I will first talk about trades that the Warriors should not do. The first trade I've seen, the rumors I've been seeing, is Paschall Siakam. And it's weird because if you asked me 2 weeks ago if the Warriors should go for Paschall Siakam, I'm like, yeah, Paschall Siakam. That's very underrated guy. I feel like he was a bit slandered too much last season. He's a good finisher. He's a great defender. He's a versatile defender. Can switch. He can operate with the ball in his hands. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, you're going to have to give up Andrew Wiggins. While obviously he's a worse player than Paschall Siakam, he fits the team more. And also, what does Paschall Siakam do that Draymond Green already doesn't do? I feel like, yeah, Siakam's a better offensive player in terms of scoring, but they both can't shoot the ball. And Draymond brings everything in terms of versatility, and he's a better playmaker than Siakam. So I was like, it kind of is a bit redundant. I feel like the Warriors have more pressing needs than adding redundancy. Also, on the same note, a Ben Simmons package also doesn't make any sense. Ben Simmons, if Paschall Siakam is close to Draymond Green in terms of a player archetype, Ben Simmons and Draymond Green are basically the same player, but Draymond Green's better. That's just a matter of the fact. So let's get into packages that actually make sense and what I think about them. So obviously, let's talk about Damien Lillard, the Dame trades that have been going crazy. The trade for Damien Lillard would involve the 7th pick, the 14th pick, Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman, and a future first rounder, potentially 2. Now, while I think Damien Lillard on this team would be amazing, not only in terms of the play on the court, but just imagine Damien Lillard and Steph Curry. I feel like the two fan bases that have been going at one another for the past 3-4 years. Whenever Damien Lillard established himself as the second best point guard in the league, or at least arguably, that would be just insanity. But I don't know if I'm being a homer. I still think the Sixers have a better package to offer, and I think the Knicks also do with Emmanuel Quickley, Mitchell Robinson, their 2 picks this year. It may be because I'm not a big James Wiseman guy, but I still think it's a valid package. There's a lot of talent at 7 and 14. If you're the Blazers, you could go for Kuminga and not have to worry about him playing, like exceeding his expectations from day one. And then obviously there's the guys like Sengun, Cooper, Davion Mitchell, who you can get also, and then Andrew Wiggins you could potentially flip. But I don't know if maybe the Blazers want to approach this like the Rockets did and just get assets and not necessarily get an impact player back day one like Ben Simmons. But I think the Sixers package is slightly a bit better, and I think the Knicks package also is better in my opinion. But obviously if the Blazers say, hey, we'll do this package, if I'm Joe Lacob, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it too. So next package is Christian Wood for James Wiseman, Eric Paschall, and the 14th overall pick. Now, if I'm the Warriors, I would do that package in a heartbeat. I mean, for one, you still get the better of your first round pick, or the better of your first round picks this year, and you get an upgrade at center, a guy who's really shown a lot of promise and was, in my opinion, probably the front runner, or at least second place to Julius Randle in terms of most improved player of the year, or most improved player award last year. I mean, he made strides throughout throughout the year. He averaged 21 points, 9.5 rebounds. He shot 37% from behind the arc on 5 attempts, so he improved as a three-point shooter. Great rebounder. You know, the fit next to Draymond and Steph and Klay, it would definitely get them over the top. Now, unless the Rockets want Evan Mobley, I just don't see why they would do this trade. And even then, you still have the logjam at center to deal with. But hey, if the Rockets want to do it for some reason, I would take that. Now, next trade, it's Colin Sexton for Jordan Poole, Kevon Looney, and the 14th overall pick. That's what I heard. And there's reports saying that Golden State won't trade Wiseman, Wiggins, or the 7th pick in a Sexton deal. I can't fathom the Cavs taking this deal. Like, it's just crazy because Colin Sexton is a really good scorer. Like, really good scorer. Like, I know he has his flaws, but if you get him on the Warriors and you can put him, I don't know if they would put him on the bench or they would just have him come in lineups. I assume he'd play a lot with the bench, but if he isn't like coming off the bench, but you put Colin Sexton in the Warriors system with that shooting and that offense, guy's averaging at least 18 off the bench, and then people are going to see how good Colin Sexton is at basketball. I know he wants a big contract, and that's kind of why the Cavs want to get rid of him, but the 14th overall pick, Jordan Poole and Kevon Looney, is what you're going to get. Jordan Poole is a good guy, is a cool dude. He's a fringe starter backup player. Kevon Looney, that guy's literally a backup. And then the 14th overall pick, like Colin Sexton, probably talent-wise, is better than the average 14th overall pick. Like, obviously, if you hit, like, a superstar with that pick, it's like, well, obviously. But most times, if you're picking 14th, you're hoping to get, like, a guy who can be a consistent starter. And Colin Sexton's, like, all-star tier-ish. I don't know. That's my opinion. Now, the next trade, there are two trades I've seen involving both Pacer centers. The first is Domantas Sabonis for Wiseman, Paschall, Kevon Looney, and a 2025 first-round pick. I mean, Domantas Sabonis fits well. I think the spacing with him and Draymond could be a bit weird, but Sabonis as a rebounder, as another playmaker, as like one of the best passing big men in the league. If we're excluding like Nikola Jokic, Domantas Sabonis is up there as well. He does have a bit of a shot, but it's not like he doesn't take it a lot, and he isn't like the percentages I don't believe are where you want them to be. I think the fit with Miles Turner a bit makes more sense just because he just complements Draymond Green so well. Like, defensively, a Draymond Green, Miles Turner frontcourt would be just disgusting. You have one of the best rim protectors in the league who's also very mobile, and then offensively, Draymond Green can facilitate and run, you know, the handoffs he does, and then Miles Turner can also shoot. So, if I'm the Warriors and I had the option between one of the two Pacer centers, I'd rather take Miles Turner just because he fits the team better. Domantas Sabonis wouldn't be bad, and I think he is an immediate upgrade over James Wiseman, but it could be a bit of an awkward fit, and I just think the fit around Miles Turner just makes a lot more sense. So I saw two packages involving Miles Turner that are very intriguing. The first one is Miles Turner, TJ Warren, Jeremy Lamb for Wiggins, Wiseman, and Paschall. Now, I'll say this off the rip. If I'm the Pacers, I would not do this trade, but if this trade does work, this first trade, if they do, accept it, then you're starting talking about conversations of where the Warriors are ranking. And because, think about this. You have Miles Turner starting at center, and then you have two good shot creators off the bench, which the Warriors last year had 0. They had Kelly Oubre, but he was very inconsistent. And so you get TJ Warren, who you can plug in at the 3 or the 4, and Jeremy Lamb, which would be amazing. Obviously, you're giving up Andrew Wiggins, but that's only to really make the money work. And then James Wiseman, Miles Turner is an immediate upgrade. Excuse me. TJ Warren would be starting. I forgot Andrew Wiggins would be gone this deal. So you get a bench guard. You get TJ Warren, who, offensively, I don't see how much far off he is from Andrew Wiggins. He might be better. And then you're getting an upgrade center and you're getting a backup guard for Eric Paschall, who didn't play really that much last year. And then the other trade, which is a bit more realistic in my opinion, it's you get Miles Turner or Malcolm Brogdon for Wiggins, James Wiseman, Jordan Poole, and the 7th overall pick. Obviously, that's a lot to give up for Turner and Brogdon. I mean, I like the strides Jordan Poole made this season. The 7th overall pick is obviously, it's a top 10 pick. You can get a lot for it. And then Wiseman still has room to improve. And Andrew Wiggins was a very quality player last year, but the fit with Miles Turner makes sense. And then you get on Malcolm Brogdon, who I can't say enough about this guy's praise. I think he truly is, if not the most underrated, one of the most underrated players in the league. I mean, I talked about it in my Sixers video. Guy can create off the bounce. He can play with the ball, without the ball. He's a great passer. I mean, you put him next to you put him next to Steph Curry. That's going to be Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. That's going to be amazing. And then Draymond Green, the actions he could run with him, like the dribble handoffs. I think that's a great fit. Obviously, you lose some bench depth, but I think it's worth in this deal. So now, there's not a lot to go in terms of free agency. I mean, like I said, the Warriors are both over the salary cap and over the luxury tax. They have 4 free agents, like I said. They have Oubre, Bazemore, Jordan Bell, and Nico Manion. I think Kelly Oubre will most likely walk because he's demanding a starting job, which with Klay Thompson coming back, he won't be getting. Plus, his value, I'm hearing, is close to $20 to $25 million. In my opinion, that's an overpay for Kelly Oubre, but some team probably is going to put a flyer out for him for maybe like the $20 million value. Now, you could technically get something back for a sign trade, but they're always so weird to project because even when the deal makes sense, like I'm thinking back to the Celtics sign trade with Gordon Hayward and the Pacers, it just made sense, and even then they couldn't come to an agreement. So it's very weird to predict, but I did see one sign trade that would be where the Warriors would get Eric Gordon and potentially a first-round pick for Kelly Oubre. I mean, Eric Gordon's better than nothing, but it's very hard to gauge sign-in trades, so you're probably going to lose Kelly Oubre. And I liked the trade when they did it at the time, but obviously it didn't pan out for the Warriors, so Kelly Oubre is going to walk, and he's going to find a job somewhere else. Kent Bazemore will probably sign back on a minimum deal, if I had to guess. I mean, maybe he might make a bit more, but he provided a good 3-and-D role off the bench for them last year, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't re-sign unless he gets more money elsewhere. And then Nico Manion, I really like Nico Manion as a bench guard for them. I think he'll sign either to a minimum or another 2-way deal. I think he should re-sign, and I think he probably will re-sign with the Warriors. I don't see why he wouldn't. And then Jordan Bell, I think he would walk. So the Warriors have a couple of things to work with. Obviously, they have the Kelly Oubre sign and trade, which could work out some stuff, but like I said, that's always so weird to do, especially when you're on the sending part of it, when you're signing a guy and trading him. The Warriors did get D'Angelo Russell a couple of years ago from a sign and trade, but I think they're just so hard to predict and gauge. I don't even want to throw that out there as they can get this guy in a sign trade. Now, it's very hard to guess that market. So they have the taxpayer mid-level at $5.89 million, and they have 2 trade exceptions, which total to around $4.5 million. So they don't have a lot to work with, and I don't think they're going to make a lot of moves in free agency. I mean, they can get one guy for $6 million, and then they can just get a bunch of veteran minimum dudes. So in terms of what I think the Warriors could go after, I think most important, I think they need to get a point guard who, regardless of who they draft, I just think another backup point guard would be beneficial to this team, someone who can kind of guide whoever they potentially may draft along the way. Also, how much are you going to trust a rookie, especially if it's a guy like Josh Giddy or Sharif Cooper, who still have to work out some kinks to get where they really need to be in the playoffs. I've seen a lot of rumors with them. Patty Mills just makes a lot of sense. He's a guy who can, veteran experience. Dude's an elite three-point shooter, shooting like high 30s for the past 3 years. Does it on good volume. He scores when you need to. Obviously, he's not a good defender, but the fit obviously makes sense. He carries with him a winning pedigree, which helps out tremendously no matter what the situation, even for a team like the Warriors who have 3 players who have won multiple championships. But that fit makes sense. If they can't get Patty Mills, I could see Austin Rivers going to that team. Now, I assume Denver might want to re-sign him, especially with the Jamal Murray injury, but I could be wrong. And I threw his name out there for the Sixers. I think TJ McConnell could work as well, especially if you give him enough floor spacing, but I thought those could be options. If you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for veteran minimums and you desperately need a backup point guard, Mike James I think is a solid option. So is Ish Smith. I assume the Nets want to re-sign Mike James. So now you could go wing, which I don't think it's as pressing of a need, but they are a bit thin in that department, especially when you're going to take into equation that Andrew Wiggins might be gone. So you want some other wings. A really interesting option I was seeing, which I completely forgot about before I was looking at this video. Rudy Gay just makes a lot of sense for this team. He's not the player he used to be in Memphis, but he's a great he's a great slasher. He got himself a jump shot. He's really built his game back up for back in San Antonio. And after tearing his Achilles, most people thought that he was done for, but off the bench, averaged 11.5 points per game. Shooting 38% from behind the arc on 4 attempts, which is, I don't know if it's his best season because there's a lot of seasons for Rudy Gay in Basketball Reference, but it's one of his better seasons from behind the arc. He's just managed to stay in this game. He can create off the bounce. He can attack the rim. He's shown an ability to shoot. So, just makes sense as a guy you bring in off the bench. And I assume you can get him for the mid-level, especially if he wants to win a championship, which at this stage of his career, Rudy Gay might want to. Alec Burks is a guy you can also bring in. He obviously signed with the Warriors in 2019, but got traded. He's a guy who's a bit younger, but he's a shot creator who can shoot from behind the arc. He might make a bit more money just because I feel like he's a bit younger and other teams might be vying for him, but you never know. There's obviously the Andre Iguodala connection. Now, he's on a team option, which I assume they probably won't take because he's making $15 million. I'll be honest, I don't know how good 38-year-old Andre Iguodala is at this point, especially with the wing market being a bit better, being really solid, and the Warriors not desperately needing a wing. Who else is there? There's Wayne Ellington. He's been a sharpshooter for his entire NBA career. I think he's a plug-and-play guy. You can put him at the backup 2 or 3, and he'll just hit shots off the bench if you need him to. Torrey Craig is a 3-and-D guy. He didn't play a whole lot in the Phoenix series, and when he did, he really wasn't wow. But you never know. I think he's an option that you could potentially put a flyer out for. And for some reason, I was looking at for players to potentially target. Danny Green would make sense, but I just think, given the fact that he can make $15 million for the Sixers, I don't know why he would take a $10 million pay cut to play for a team that, arguably, or not even arguably, inarguably is, worse. But, hey, let's throw that name out there. If you want to go, guys, if you want to get veteran minimum guys, Ben McLemore, shot creator off the bench, Tony Snell, 3-and-D guy. They're not going to impress you, but for veteran minimums, they'll work. Now, if you desperately, and desperately need a wing, and you get none of these guys, these are bottom of the barrel You hope they can do something, but they probably won't. But you can get them for veterans minimum. Wesley Matthews, Avery Bradley, Otto Porter, Trevor Ariza. I mean, for like the 3 of the 4 guys, I just think they're too old at this point to be where they used to be like 5-10 years ago. And Otto Porter, I'm just not a huge Otto Porter guy, but for like $2 million a year, I guess it's not horrible, especially if you desperately need like a backup 2, 3, or 4. Which the Warriors do need. Now, another thing, I don't think this is as a desperate as a need as like some people are claiming to be, which is a backup 5. I mean, if you look at their roster right now, they have Wiseman, they have Kevon Looney, Marquise Chris should come back, and Draymond Green plays the small ball 5. I don't think you desperately need a 5, but I just saw in so many like Warrior free agent plans that like this they need to get a backup 5, and I'm like, I don't necessarily think they need to get a backup 5, but whatever. Veteran minimum guys, Cody Zeller, JaVale McGee, Taj Gibson, and Namaja Bjelica. I know Bjelica is a power forward, technically, but I was like, he's not a wing, but he's not like a big. So I just put him there. I mean, 3-point shooter off the bench. He's shot over high 30s from behind the arc his entire career. He's a guy plug and play. Playing for like 10, 15 minutes. He's going to knock down some shots for you. Hopefully he doesn't suck too much as a defender. Cody Zeller, a highish floor, low ceiling. Will never wow you, but I feel like he never like really hurts you. He's a solid rebounder. Oh, like whatever defender. He's not going to like wow you, but I feel like he's not going to be a liability. And then you can potentially bring back JaVale McGee as a rim running center. And then Taj Gibson's more of like a grit and grind kind of a dude if you want him in the locker room. In terms of what what's realistic, worst case scenario, best case scenario for the Warriors. The worst case scenario, in my opinion, is you don't make a trade for even a Miles Turner. Like you don't make any trade at all. You enter this season with whoever you drafted at 7, whoever you drafted at 14, and then you kind of like patch up whatever you can in free agency because the Warriors obviously have great talent. I mean, Steph Curry is a top 5 player in the league. Draymond Green's one of the best defenders in the league. And obviously the jury's still out on Klay Thompson, but especially given what happened with Klay Thompson, I'm a bit more rest assured of Klay Thompson making a close to 100% comeback, at least offensively. But the rest of their team is just like a lot of question marks. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is probably the most consistent of like their role players if we're excluding Draymond. But like James Wiseman, how's he going to develop? Jordan Poole, he has his moments, but he's not like always amazing. Toscano Anderson's the same thing. They still don't have a backup point guard, and even if like they get like, even when you have like Patty Mills, it's still like a glaring weakness on the roster. So I think their worst case scenario is just kind of staying in the same spot because if you look at the Western Conference, let's say you have a team next year of Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Draymond, James Wiseman, Davion Mitchell, Moses Moody, Toscano, Poole, and like Looney or Chris. I mean, it's not as like bad in terms of depth-wise from last year's team, but it's not competing with either LA team, especially if they're healthy. I still think Phoenix is going to be better if they retain Chris Paul. Utah, you have a case, but I think Utah is better. So you're like the 6th seed, and you're going to have a first-round matchup against either one of the LA teams or the Phoenix Suns. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, realistically, who do I think the Warriors are going to get? Honestly, in terms of the draft, I think Moses Moody just makes sense, but in terms of the other pick, I have no clue who they can... Like, obviously, I have like ideas of who I want, but you can say, man, Davion Mitchell, point guard off the bench, does everything, an elite defender, good shot creator, good 3-point shooter. You know, he's a guy who can make an impact from day one. You know, Josh Giddy, excellent playmaker and floor general. You know, amazing passing ability, can finish at the cup. He's 6'8". You know, look at that. I'm like, yeah, they need a playmaker off the bench. Sharif Cooper, that dude can go at 100 miles per hour. He also is an amazing passer himself. He, you know, has some improvements to make from the jump shot, but he's still finishing attack in the rim. He doesn't care what shot he's taking. He has such confidence. I'm like, yeah, the Warriors could use that. Sengun, oh my God, he's a big man who can do almost everything offensively. He can attack the glass. Yeah, the Warriors could need that. That's the problem. That's the problem with this Warriors team right now. They can need. They have a lot of stuff that you can realistically say they can need, and I think realistically, I think Sengun might be gone at 14. If I had to think out of all those guys, I think Sharif Cooper, out of the 4 guys I listed, out of those 4 big guys, I think is the most likely to be, I think he's guaranteed to be available at 14 unless, something absolutely insane happens, but I think any of those 4 guys are realistic and fit the Warriors' needs. And in terms of free agency, or in terms of a trade, I think the Miles Turner trade just makes sense, especially since the Pacers look to be rebuilding, or at least I think they should be rebuilding. So they'll be like, yeah, let's get the second overall pick, or from the second overall pick from last year's draft for him, and we'll also take on potentially a first or another guy who we can flip for assets. I think that's realistic. I don't think they'll get Dame. Christian Wood just doesn't make sense for the Houston Rockets, and then the other trades I don't think are good trades. Maybe Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton could also isn't totally out of the realm of possibility, but I don't know. I just think Miles Turner just makes way too much sense based on what they need. And then in terms of free agency, you get Patty Mills and maybe another wing guy like Ben McLemore or Tony Snell. So that's not a bad team. And then best case scenario, I would say best case scenario, you get James Bouknight in the draft. He somehow falls to 7. You pick up, give me any of the options for the 4 dudes. I think they'll be, either of them will be fine. Maybe Bouknight and Davion Mitchell wouldn't be a good fit. Wouldn't be a good fit, but I just roll with it. I think any of the 4 guys plus Bouknight's best case scenario, and then you get a Damien Lillard trade. I think that's best case scenario. I don't think that's going to happen because I think Damien Lillard, I think there's just better suitors for Damien Lillard in terms of trade assets. Let's use the realistic team. So you can go a couple ways. You can go Curry, Brogdon, Klay, Draymond, Miles Turner, or you can go Curry, Klay, Toscano, Anderson, Draymond, Turner with Malcolm Brogdon, Mitchell, Moody, Sengun, whoever they pick off the bench, and then the other guys to fill out. It really depends what impact those rookies make. Because, and also I think the health of the other teams. Because we saw how good we saw how elite Steph Curry still is. And if we get, let's say we get 20 point per game Klay Thompson on good shooting splits with Draymond continuing his play. You get good play from Miles Turner. Malcolm Brogdon does his thing. And then the rookies are at least competent and playable and not awful and are healthy. That can be a potential Western Conference draw. I wouldn't take it out of the realm of possibilities. Especially if things bounce your way. So, yeah, I think the Warriors have a lot of questions going into this offseason, and I think it's going to be very interesting, and we might see the return of one of the greatest teams we've seen this past decade, and potentially in NBA history, back to their roots. And if you stuck through this video, shout out to you. You are awesome. And I'm out. Peace.